The attention of viewers can be captured and held by true crime stories. The most intriguing crimes that a person may commit are serial murders, both minor and major. This video gives the impression that some of these events, no matter how heinous or immoral, actually took place. Here are a few real-life examples of serial killings. David Paul Brown, Nathaniel Bar-Jonah's father, was born in Worcester, Massachusetts on February 15, 1957. He enticed a neighbor into his basement in July when he was 7 years old and tried to strangle her. He sexually molested a 6-year-old neighbor in January 1970. In March 1975, he kidnapped Richard O'Connor, an 8-year-old boy, by pretending to be a police officer. A few days before receiving his high school diploma, he once more pretended to be a police officer and kidnapped a 9-year-old child. He lured 2 boys to a remote location on September 24, 1977, bound them, strangled them, and spat cigarette ashes on them while posing as an undercover FBI agent. Then, Nathaniel, a 375-pound man, leaped onto one of the boys' chests, thinking the youngsters were already dead. After being found guilty of attempted murder, Nathaniel Benjamin Levy Bar-Jonah was given a prison term of 18 to 20 years. On March 22, 1984, he changed his name to Nathaniel Benjamin Levy Bar-Jonah to better reflect his Jewish heritage. Later the same year, Superior Court Judge Walter E. Steele decided that Massachusetts had not provided sufficient evidence to establish Nathaniel's risk. Nathaniel noticed a 7-year-old boy sitting alone in a car outside of a post office in Oxford, Massachusetts, a month after his release. Nathaniel entered the car and sat on the boy's chest, weighing 275 pounds at the time. Nathaniel was detained after an officer recognized him from a photograph taken 15 years earlier. On February 6, 1996, at around 7:34 a.m., 10-year-old Zach Ramsey left his flat to go to school. He was dressed in stonewashed trousers, a blue football jersey and green sleeves, black high-top trainers, and a denim jacket with green sleeves. Zach was spotted by a family who lived in an apartment down the alley. Zach was pronounced legally dead in 2011, despite his mother's protests. Years after Zach vanished, investigations revealed that Nathaniel had used his mother's 4-door, off-white 1978 Toyota Corolla on the day Zach vanished. Detectives found a list of boys' names while searching Nathaniel's flat, including those of previous victims and Zachary Ramsey, followed by the word died. Newspaper cuttings about Zach's case were also discovered in the flat. Zach's clothing from the day he vanished was found in the flat, along with bloody gloves, according to Nathaniel's previous flatmate. James Tedda was kidnapped from Massachusetts on August 23, 1973, and officials suspect Nathaniel was involved because they discovered notebooks with coded writing in them. On August 25, 1973, his body was discovered along Route 119 in Ridge, New Hampshire. He had been killed and abused, as the autopsy report indicated. In 1999, Nathaniel was detained for pretending to be a police officer, and he was later charged with kidnapping and sexually assaulting 3 minors. He was found guilty of kidnapping, sexual assault, and aggravated assault, along with allegations that he tortured one of the boys and suspended him from the ceiling. Mary Patrone, 36, identified Nathaniel as the perpetrator of her 1974 kidnapping and abuse during the trial. Because the statute of limitations had passed, Nathaniel could not be held accountable for that offense. Nathaniel received a 130-year prison term. He upheld his innocence until his myocardial infarction caused his death on April 13, 2008. Gibson is an American serial killer and rapist who has claimed responsibility for up to 30 additional murders, none of which have been confirmed. William Clyde Gibson III was born in 1957 in Raleigh, North Carolina, and moved to New Albany, Indiana, when he was just 2 years old. From an early age, he displayed odd behavior and was bullied at school. He then joined the Army and developed an addiction to drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and LSD. He was given a year in prison at Fort Leavenworth in 1979 after being dishonorably discharged for stealing a car, during which time he made an attempt on his own life. After his release, he married an artist, but after he was diagnosed with infertility, he intensified his drug use. Gibson was charged with robbery and sexual battery for an incident involving a 21-year-old woman. His lawyer claimed he was mentally ill but a competency evaluation revealed he had an IQ of 79 and refused to take responsibility for his actions. He was found competent to stand trial and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. During his imprisonment, he refused to admit responsibility and was deemed ineligible to participate in a sex offender rehabilitation program. Gibson was an obedient inmate who rarely caused trouble, but had poor judgment and experienced conflicting feelings of loneliness and losing control. He was released on April 5, 1999, and was added to the Indiana Sex and Violent Offender Registry. After his release, he started dating Kelly Bailey, but she left due to his worsening drug habits. He was charged with burglarizing a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and given a 3-year prison term. However, he was permitted to serve half that time at the Madison State Hospital. 2 psychiatrists diagnosed him with bipolar disorder, but no indications of mental illness or any psychiatric disorder were noted. On October 10, 2002, Michael Gibson was out drinking in Jeffersonville when he encountered Port Orange, Florida-born beautician Karen Sue Hodella, 44. They spat about some allegedly stolen prescription drugs that Gibson claimed to have taken. Hodella was stabbed numerous times in the throat by Gibson, who was furious, before driving around and dumping her body in Clarksville. Gibson was taken into custody for drunkenly operating a GMC pickup 3 weeks after the incident. After a 4-day withdrawal, he was examined by the prison's psychiatrist, who concluded that he suffered from mild anxiety and had indications of antisocial behavior, but was otherwise sane. Gibson filed a lawsuit against the jail administration in May 2003, alleging that they had wrongfully refused him access to Seroquel and that they had kept him in filthy quarters, but a federal judge dismissed the case. After being let out of jail, Gibson continued to frequent bars, but on February 21, 2006, he stole a woman's pocketbook and $300. Gibson was arrested for theft and served a 3-year sentence until he was released in 2009. During that time, he found a job at CNC Hardwood Flooring in Broden and was regarded positively by friends and neighbors for attending the local non-denominational Power of the Cross Church, making papier-mâché figures and helping his sick mother. However, he stopped attending church altogether in late August 2011 when his mother was admitted to a nursing home and passed away. On March 24th, he met 35-year-old Stephanie Marie Kirk at an uptown bar in New Albany and argued over some pills. In his anger, he proceeded to rape and strangle her, sexually assaulting her body, breaking her back in the process, and then burying her body in the backyard. On April 18th, he was visited by a 75-year-old friend of his late mother, Christine Wittes, and raped and strangled her before mutilating her corpse, cutting one of her breasts off. After that, he abandoned the body on the garage floor, which was covered in garbage bags. On October 25, 2013, one of Gibson's sisters went to their mother's house to settle the division of the family estate and found Wittes' body. 5 days after Wittes' murder accusation was filed, Gibson was charged with drunk driving while using Wittes' vehicle. He confessed his responsibility for Hodella's murder and led them to the location where he had buried Kirk's body. On May 23rd, Gibson was officially charged with all 3 killings, with prosecutors announcing that they would seek the death penalty for all 3 killings. The prosecution used an interview Gibson conducted with police after his detention, in which he stated that evil had taken control of him and forced him to perform the murder. On October 25, 2013, a jury found Gibson guilty of killing Wittes, and he was given the death penalty. He changed his plea and gave up the chance of a jury trial in the upcoming murder prosecution. In his appeals against his death sentence, his lawyers claimed that his confession on the Kirk murder was a mitigating element. Nevertheless, the Indiana Supreme Court denied these arguments and upheld all of the convictions. He was featured in the 2018 Trevor McDonald-hosted documentary, Inside Death Row, and he has also participated in interviews for a number of podcasts, confessing to an additional 30 slayings that occurred in several states, including the slaying of Elizabeth Bannister in the year 2000. Dennis Rader, real name Dennis Lynn Rader, alias BTK or BTK Killer, was a serial killer in the United States who killed 10 people over the course of 3 decades until being apprehended and confessing in 2005. He was born on March 9, 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Because he chained, tortured, and killed his victims, he went by the moniker BTK. In Wichita, Kansas, Rader was raised. He later said that as a young man, he had slaughtered animals and had violent bondage-related sexual fantasies. He served in the U.S. Air Force in the 1960s before moving back to Wichita in 1970, where he got married and had 2 kids. He held a number of jobs, including a brief period spent working in a Coleman Company plant that made camping equipment. In 1979, he graduated from Wichita State University with a degree in criminal justice. He started working for ADT, a home security firm, about this time, and Park City, Kansas hired him as an enforcement officer in 1991. Rader served as a Boy Scouts leader and was an active churchgoer. On January 15, 1974, Rader, a former employee of Coleman, killed 4 members of his family, including 2 children, at their Wichita home. Semen was found at the location, even though none of the victims had experienced sexual assault. Rader burglarized the home and stole a watch. He also followed victims and took their belongings, frequently undergarments. Rader singled out a 21-year-old Coleman employee in 1974. He managed to escape after being shot by her brother, whom he had encountered after breaking into her house. Rader fatally stabbed the guy before fleeing. He described the January killing in a letter that he wrote later that year, adding, "The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK." He placed a note inside a book at the Wichita Public Library, and the police eventually found it. Rader killed 5 more women in the subsequent 20 years. He choked his 6th victim in March 1977 after isolating her from her 3 young children and locking them in the toilet. In December 1977, when his next victim passed away, Rader lost his cool over the media's lack of coverage. "How many individuals do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some global attention?" he posted in a letter to the local TV station. The subsequent media attention added to the anxiety. Then in 1985, Rader killed a neighbor in her home after waiting 8 years. It is claimed that after doing so, he took her body to his church and took pictures of her being held there as a slave. A 28-year-old mother of 2 was slain in 1986. In 1991, Rader strangled a 62-year-old woman in her isolated home to death. She was his last victim. The cases were then concluded. On the 30th anniversary of Rader's initial murders, a local newspaper ran a story in 2004 assuming that Rader had either died or been imprisoned. Rader responded by sending images of the victim's body, as well as a variety of other pieces of evidence from his 9th murder, such as a copy of the victim's driver's license. He scattered mementos throughout Wichita or sent packages to the media during the ensuing years. He frequently stored sketches, crime scene mementos like photos and written descriptions of the killings, dolls organized to simulate the numerous fatalities, and even criminal souvenirs like cereal boxes. There is possibly a mention of the phrase serial killer among them. In January 2005, police made an arrest after finding a cereal box with a note from Rader requesting they follow a floppy disk he planned to send. According to law enforcement officials, it would be obtained through a classified advertisement. He then shipped them a DVD, which the police quickly found at his church, where he was the president of the congregation. The DNA of Rader was then compared with the semen found at the first crime scene. He confessed to the crimes as soon as he was hauled into custody in February 2005 and expressed shock that the police had misled him. After pleading guilty in June, Rader received 10 consecutive life sentences 2 months later. Everybody, be careful out there. You never know where someone might be lurking. Be sure to subscribe and come back for more amazing true crime stories.